Hello. Hey, Denise, do you know if Chris is coming?
I thought
What I
Christine
forgot,
said
she's
she
not
wasn't
going
going
to
to be
make
here
it
this
today.
month.
She did mention that to me. I totally forgot about it.
Yeah, I remember her saying that.
I did start it, so we are on TV
Oh,
or YouTube or whatever it is.
Here we go.
I'm his old.
Um, it's fine, I think, probably, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why not?
Whatever you want.
yeah, I'm just going to stay here. No, you can go. You can move. I'm already situated, so.
That's a good plan.
Do you want
All
the
right.
garbage can too?
Okay.
Steve?
So hopefully we're more decisive with our conversation.
Okay, are we ready? All right. It is working. The Planning Commission to be held in the Common Council Chambers, Room 100 of the Greenfield City Hall on Tuesday, October 8th, 2019 at 6 p.m. is called to order. Would you please call the roll?
Mayor Knightsky,
Present.
Alderperson Kastner, Denise Collins,
Present.
Steve Rogers, Brian Weiss,
Present.
Don Carlson,
President?
Present.
Bob Krantz.
Present.
Okay, just before we get started, Commissioner Helene will not make it tonight. Alternate Mr. Kranz is a voting member this evening. Under item 2, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the September 10th, 2019 meeting.
I'll abstain.
Motion for approval.
Motion
I'll
by
second.
Alderperson Kastner, second by Commissioner Weiss. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Rogers abstains. Item 3, discussion regarding the last common council meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Common Council approved Jin's Sushi Seafood and Bar. There was quite a bit of discussion about Alexi's Auto Repair and Transport on Loomis and 51st. The Common Council actually held the item, and since then, the applicant has exited his lease with the property owner and has decided not to move forward with the proposal. The discontinuance of West Holmes Avenue right-of-way was approved, and the ordinance amendment was approved. That was various changes to special uses and permitted uses. However, the Common Council did divide. There was a animal pet store, pet supply that was combined as one, and they chose to separate it. So pet stores that would sell pets would require a special use permit, and pet supply stores would be a permitted use.
Okay, thank you. Item 4 is a certified survey map to combine 2 existing parcels located at Advanced Camping Sales 6606 West Layton Avenue. This was part of the condition of approval previously. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner
Second.
Weiss, second by Commissioner Collins. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item 5 is signage plan appeal for Jin's Sushi Seafood and Bar, the proposed business located at 74010.
There's a typo. That last zero is not supposed to be in there.
Okay.
I just noticed that.
West Barnard Avenue, submitted by Paul Butler, Bauer Signs. Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion Commissioner Carlson, second by Commissioner Kranz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 6 is a conceptual plan for the local, a component of the 84 South development at the northwest corner of South 84th and West Layton Avenue, submitted by Scott Yauk, doing business at 84 South Restaurants, and Audrey Gill from Rinka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item was before the Plan Commission, also as a conceptual plan in August. At that time, the proposal included 3 different buildings to the very southeast corner of the 84 South development, but the northwest corner of 84th and Layton. And since then, the developer has gone back and reconsidered the options and is moving forward with a concept that includes 2 buildings. So with that, I actually am going to turn the presentation over to Rinka. I'll just pull up the slides, and Rinka will provide the presentation before the Plan Commission this evening.
Yeah, just before you start, just one quick thing. This is, I think, the 4th or 5th conceptual plan. This is probably the most talked about corner in the city, and we're just trying to make sure that it's done right. So, all right.
Thank you for having me. I'm here in front of you to present an update to you as a conceptual submittal. The idea here is that we heard the feedback last time, and working with our client and developer of this project as well as kind of wrapping up the final pieces of this overall development. We're also the architect for 84 South. We wanted to make sure that we're continuously working with the feedback that we've received, as well as some of the council members. The idea here is to really kind of create a very vibrant and very kind of destinational location for your city and for the patrons that are both residents and future visitors to this area. And we would like to provide you with an update today, as well as an animation and some imagery that will kind of walk you through the changes that have been made since the last presentation. So moving forward here, what you see on the screen is essentially 84th Street on your right-hand side, Layton Avenue on the bottom of the page. This is the southeast corner, essentially, or northwest corner of this intersection, southeast corner of the overall 84 South development. There are two buildings proposed here on the site, C1 and C2. C2 is essentially a beer hall or larger food and beverage establishment. It's essentially a two-story space that has limited seating on the second floor, as well as some outdoor seating. First floor is really a large food hall and beer hall that is conceptually going to work as a space that flows out into that center area, which you see labeled as beer garden on the site plan. Across from that is a C1 building. It's a public market space. It's essentially envisioned as a space that's 2 levels, has some space upstairs for seating, as well as some small event space. But the idea here is the first floor is really kind of a very open public market with a series of 8 to 10 vendors with some kind of great activity and seating areas for the community to gather. That building also as well spills open onto the beer garden space in the center, and both of those buildings work in concert to kind of work around this central space. What you see in the bottom right corner of the map, there's an area there of landscaping. We're addressing the corner condition there at 84th and Layton. We're also showing a small seating area, which I'll talk a little bit more. And as you can see, the parking to the north and west also is accommodating for a good ratio to make sure that there's plenty of parking for patrons that are coming to visit the site. I'll zoom in here. You can see a little bit more of the detail. You can see the tiered seating at the south between the two buildings. You can see that is an area that's doing dual purpose. It's creating a variety of seating options for patrons as they come to this area. It's also creating a sound buffer and a visual buffer to Layton Avenue, because we all know that when we're sitting outside enjoying our dinner or our beer, we don't want to make sure it doesn't feel like we're sitting on a very highly trafficked street. So we're doing some of those moves on the site, as well as making sure that we've got a drop-off condition to make sure we can get patrons safely in and out of this area. We've got bicycle parking accommodated, and we've also got trash and refuse located as well to make sure that we're separating those uses and making sure that people can use the space in a great manner. Moving forward, I'll walk you through a few diagrams of some of the conceptual programming that's been talked about that we're still kind of working through from a programming perspective, but it gives you an idea of what could actually fit here. The area in the center, that purple area, is I've mentioned before, is a beer garden. There's ways to get around this space pretty easily. There's seating areas and seating pockets around it. There's great ways to get to the parking in a safe way. We've got protected sidewalks. We've got easy access. We've got great areas for people both on foot and on bicycles to get onto the site safely and enjoy the available amenities here. Moving forward, not that these are what we're going to essentially be doing, but we had to make sure that as we designed this, and as we've designed other projects, that we're thinking about the flexible future nature of this site. So we looked at what we could actually fit on this site, and what you're seeing there represented in the next few slides are a couple different activities that could fit within the central beer garden area. We're showing there a temporary ice rink that could be there for some of those winter months, as well as a space for a holiday tree, if that was something that this developer and working with the city wanted to propose. There's also 15 by 50 half sheets for curling. Again, this is something that's become a little bit of a popular event. It's a great way to kind of get people out in those colder months when we know that that's really kind of the activation time for that. So, the space is envisioned to really kind of be a space that's used year-round as much as possible, weather permitting, but it allows us to be flexible with the programming, so we can have activities in those colder months, bring in temporary heat, those kinds of things, extend the seasons a little bit more, knowing that our environment tends to get cold for quite a bit of the year. You can also see there's also an area here for markets. What you see on the screen is essentially 10-foot by 10-foot stalls, whether it's a farmer's market on the weekends, whether it's a Christmas or winter market in the holiday season, or it could be an art fair of any kind. You can see we can fit quite a few tents here in that center space. There's also room here for a smaller soccer field. So what you're seeing here is basically a 60 by 110 foot field that could be brought in temporarily for events on the weekend. Maybe it's a small tournament. It could be a variety of different ways to use that space. Other things that are optional, as we think about sponsorships, or as we think about partnerships with other area organizations, there's room in here for essentially three on 3 tournament courts that could be done on an early Saturday morning as part of a tournament. Gets people out to the area, gets people moving around, enjoying the space. We also talked about, what if there's an area here for a viewing party? So say there's, the World Cup is going on, you want to get out for some of the games. It's a great way to get around some of your community. If we set up a screen here at the bottom end of where kind of that seating area is, you can see that we can fit quite a few people in here for a viewing party for that temporary event. Same thing with the stage. You'll see the tiered seating is actually convertible pretty easily to a stage area. If we wanted to bring in some local entertainment, do something like an Oktoberfest or a variety of other events, there's plenty of room here for people to get together and be able to flow through the space without too much trouble. So I'll get into the floor plans here. I'll move through these pretty quickly, but the beer garden you'll see on the left side of the screen, 7.4 thousand square foot first floor, essentially consists of a large food hall in the center with a bar and full kitchen, as well as on the south end of that, essentially a private dining area that can serve as overflow seating. On the right-hand side is the market aspect of this. It's essentially kind of a public multi-vendor space. It's got restrooms on the first floor, a small amount of them to make sure that's accommodated, space for 8 to 10 vendors, as well as potentially some vendors along the perimeter that could potentially have a pickup window if it came to that as one of those tenants, as they get considered. You can see the one big difference between this public market and some of the other public markets you may have been to in your travels, or even in the neighboring cities, is most of them don't have seating on the first floor. They actually become very congested and don't work very well for kind of hanging out and having a place for a community to gather. We took a very different approach here, and we want to bring seating down to that first floor, give people a great place to get together. When it's great weather outside, that wall that faces the beer garden is operable. We can open up garage doors and make it a really great space to be at, whether you're having your morning coffee or getting together for dinner in the afternoon. Going up to the second level, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's the second floor of the beer hall space. Essentially what it is a large open space in the center with perimeter seating, and you'll see 2 outdoor areas, both of them kept fairly small, knowing that there's a variety of seating options here on site. Over on the right-hand side, the public market, the second floor area is treated very similar. It's got a large open space that lets you look down onto the markets. You can see a lot of the activity. A big problem with public markets that have second floor seating is that it's not very desirable. It's a very dark space. It's usually very limited, and you're immediately away from the action. We know there's a need for seating here, especially as we look to make this a successful place. We know there's going to be a need for some seating. It also is very convertible. You can have large gatherings up here. You could have a big community meeting if you wanted to. There's this room up there for a bar as part of an event. The restrooms are up there as well as some outdoor seating that looks out over that beer garden. I'd like to play an animation for you here to give you a little bit of flavor of the architecture and the advancements we've made from the last plan. I'll give you an idea too of the scale of the space, and then I can go into some of those renderings right after that. So we're going to start here on the northwest corner. Between the buildings there. We'll come around here to the east. This is now at the intersection of 84th and Layton. There's that seating area on Buffer. We'll talk about to limit noise and make sure there's different flexible seating options. We'll fly through the center beer garden space here. This is looking at the market side. As we flip back to the presentation, as you can see, some of the things that we've really focused on in this iteration is to really kind of create that great outdoor area for people to gather, get together. It was, the previous iteration was, 3 buildings that essentially were food and beverage buildings, and we were challenged to kind of bring together another concept here that might get a lot more variety, a lot more reasons to come to this space, a lot more seating options and places for the community to gather, so they can come to the market, they can, pick up a smoothie and pick up some flowers possibly and go sit outside and enjoy the weather, enjoy their community. If you wanted to get together with a bigger group of people, you had a place to go to. It didn't feel like you'd be out of place if you were going to, say, just a standard restaurant where it might seem a little bit out of place. So we wanted to address some of those things, make sure there was various levels of seating and opportunity to gather. So both buildings have outdoor second floor seating in different ways, whether it's a very dedicated dining or if it's kind of an outdoor lounge space. We've got a variety of those types. I'll flip through here. This is some of the images you saw in the animation. This is up in the air looking back down at the site. As you can see, as we move in here, the central space is this taller trellis structure that would have lighting into it. Essentially, what it does is takes that open space and brings down the scale of it. It's very similar in size, slightly shorter than what you would have experienced if you've been down to the entertainment block, for example, down in downtown Milwaukee. You can see that both buildings on either side are flanked that center space. There's a central drop-off area, and both of the buildings essentially have facades that open up onto that central space. This is directly north of the property, looking back towards the south. You can see that the central space is kept to a very specific size. It works for all those flexible different events that I was talking about to make sure that it's sized appropriately, but the scale is still very intimate so that people feel very comfortable in that space. It's something we do a lot in a lot of the projects we design, and it was very important here that the space feels very active and friendly and great to be in, whether there's 10 people around you or there's 100 people around you. A view of the area from, what a night shot is. Really, the buildings would kind of just glow from the interior lighting. There isn't any major plans to uplight any of the buildings. There would just be signage, knowing that there's, other properties in the area. This is a view from 84th and Layton. Looking back, we're envisioning some great signage up on top of that building to kind of promote the fact this is Greenfield Public Market. There's some signage on that lawn for the local, which is the brand of the kind of this micro development within the larger development. You can see we've brought in a lot of windows and glazing so you can get a peek into that action and see with that activity, whether you're sitting at that intersection on 84th Lane and waiting for that light to change and really kind of piquing the interest of visitors to your area to make sure that they understand that there's a great vibrant place for them to go visit, hang out, and eventually come back to. This is right over by that green lawn that I mentioned. This is looking back towards that market building on the right. On the left side is the beer hall. You can see we're going to bring a lot of those same seating elements, variety of seating types. There'll be areas there for games. There'll be festoon lights to make sure that it's a very safe and well-lit environment in the later hours, as well as great opportunities for a variety of different reconfigurable areas in the center so different events can be accommodated. This is now looking from the drop-off area, so you're on the north side of this looking back towards the south. You can see the market is directly to your left. You can see that even on that second floor area of the market, that trellis structure overhead is providing some shade, knowing that the sun is going to move eventually from the south over to the west. So we're providing some shaded areas, making sure there's various, again, levels of seating types and different ways to experience the space. This is a night shot, and I just want to, before we jump into this, we did bring some VR goggles. I'd like to share them with you. If you guys can put them on, if you're more than welcome to. We'll actually put you right in the middle of this space. We'll actually put you right in the middle of the plaza. Using one of the pointers, you can actually go into the market, both on the first floor, second floor, and the second floor of the beer hall. We'd be happy to show that with you if you guys have any interest. And that kind of concludes my presentation.
It's definitely worth it.
Yes.
So Tommy here is going to bring the goggles to you. You may want to stay seated and just spin around in your chair. You can get a little disoriented. But the pointer you have, you don't need to click anything. There are circles that are marked with different area names. If you just hold the pointer at that circle for a second, you'll see something load. It'll transform you right into that other space. So it'll give you an idea as to what these spaces will feel like once it's built out. As we know that something of this scale is a little hard to understand if from the animations and renderings. So we'll pass these around. Feel free to. Now there is sound and everything.
Already did it, so he did.
I played this game already.
While those are getting passed around, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the development and the updates to the design.
Well, I'd just like to say I'm very impressed with how green it is and the flowers, the plantings, and I love all the windows and lights. I just wanted to make one suggestion, and this is just out there. I don't know the restaurant or that's going to be there or anything, and just on the second level where they do have the plantings.
Yep.
Just something to suggest. I know Northwestern Mutual has done that. I've also been to restaurants where, on a high rise, where they have done that, and also in San Francisco, I believe it was, that they have had this, but where they have had herb gardens.
Yes.
Something, just I'm putting it out there, maybe something to put, and that would be something that maybe if the restaurant might
Yeah.
be interested, because they would have to take care of it, and maybe they might want to use that if the chef would be interested. Again, I'm not sure what kind of restaurant it's going to be. You don't have to be a 4-star, 5-star restaurant to do something like that, but that might be something they could be interested. I just want to put that as a suggestion. And the other thing that you really perked my ears, I'm also on the Park and Rec Board, I'm the board chair, but I do have several friends and other counties that are involved with curling. Wow, that would be really neat. If I don't know anywhere close by that we have curling, but and that's something you don't have to be, very super athletic at. But that would be something very neat to have around here. That really sounded fun if we had something like that.
We think it's a great idea. The only place we've seen them pop up as close by is there's a few rooftops in Chicago that have taken the leap, some hotels.
Yeah.
That have taken the leap to understand that the nature of gaming and social environments is changing. And so we thought it was a great thing. We've actually been to a few of those ourselves.
Yes.
Thought it'd be a great opportunity to, again, extend the shoulder seasons
Right.
that we have here. Wisconsin is a very cold climate. and
Right.
We understand that, but we are always looking for, opportunities to be outside and enjoy the weather. So great comment, as well as the greenery on the rooftop. It's a great idea. It obviously add the aromatics to it, and the idea too is that the greenery actually helps both from buffering of sound around you, as well as screening, making sure you're always looking at something green in front of
Right.
you. So great idea. We'll take that back and consider it.
Okay, but it's very relaxing, and I love eating up on the rooftops like that. That is nice and very comforting, like you said, and too, it reduces the noise. But this looks fantastic, and I'll look at the toy next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's a great fit with the open concept.
Thanks. Okay.
A restaurant next door.
Make sure you're talking to your mic, okay?
I just, I love the rendering. I think it's a great concept, and
Thank you. Thank you very much.
you see a circle, it says like go to market or go to beer, that kind of thing.
Go to market or go to beer?
With this type of facility, you'd more than likely have an event coordinator, someone that would manage all of the facility outside and make sure everyone's playing all together and the events happen, I assume?
Yeah, ideally, there'd be somebody, who's overlooking that, whether it's a partnership with the city or whether the developer takes it on themselves. That's yet to be determined. I know there'll be some negotiations to be had on that. But yeah, anything you can do to activate the space with intentional programming always helps. It'll just be a matter of coordinating kind of some of those efforts.
We had talked a good bit last time about putting some kind of a covering over the central area there, and that's not there, so I'm assuming that's just not doable.
There's different ways to do it. What I would always recommend against is any sort of permanent cover. Unfortunately, this is a very gray area for the state of Wisconsin, and it tends to push something of a structure of this size into a building category, which starts to increase all sorts of costs and other items that you have to do because they don't know how to classify this kind of structure. We have firsthand experience doing the entertainment block this way. But what we can do and what we do recommend as an exploration down the road is there are ways to provide temporary covers on these. Basically there's companies out there who will build those structures for you, essentially fit within the framing of what it is. you pay for it one time, it gets stored every season, gets brought out for those temporary conditions. Those are very much allowable for a short amount of time frame, usually those cold winter months where you want to provide some cover. But we wouldn't recommend a permanent structure here. It tends to work against the programming and the openness and what you're trying to accomplish on a more days of the year.
You know, it looks great. I mean, there's no doubt it really does look good. It just,
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns?
I was going to ask Christie to go
Krantz?
back to where I can see the drop off.
This-
Side plan, yeah. Up on top there. Now, where's the road in relation to the drop off?
I'll go back out to the larger site plan.
Yeah, pretty far away.
There you go.
Okay. What kind of signage would you recommend for having a drop off?
So what we do is there's different ways to get into the site. Obviously, you can get in off of Layton. That's one way to get in. We would have some, and probably recommend some small wayfinding there that allows you to understand where that drop-off would be. There's going to be some signage that comes along with this development to make sure people understand where those entry points are in. Within that signage, there could be secondary signage that points you to the drop-off, so it's very easy. What we usually find in developments like this is you go there once, you figure it out. After that, it's pretty second nature to get through these developments. It's really just giving people a clear path to get to that drop-off location or any part of the site that for that first time. After that, it's really muscle memory when you get to these sites over and over.
Question for you on C2?
Yes.
On the west side of the building where you have 10, we have these cars. Is that a parking requirement to have those spots there? Or do you better serve with more green space over there considering what the use could be?
I would say as successful as we hope this will be, parking is at a premium in this area, so we really tried to find as many parking stalls as we could and still include as much landscaping as possible. So as you can see down that center aisle, to make sure that people coming over all the way from the west side of the development have a very protected, deliberate path over. We've given up, a good, I'd say, 12 stalls there just for that purpose. We think those are very valuable 12 stalls to lose, but we know that in the best interest of protecting the public and getting them over to that area, it's very important. So we'd look for everywhere we could do that and bring back green space, but still make sure we can met the parking requirements that we know some of these tenants are going to be looking for, to make sure that they're also very inclined to come here and provide their services and give you great places to visit.
Sure. I was just thinking about more outdoor seating there as well on the west side of the building. When
Yep.
you think of the
And we've got delivery and trash on that one corner, so we just want to make sure, we want to separate the seating area just because of the way the wind blows in this area. That's the last thing you want to smell while you're having a dinner.
question.
The other thing to take into account too, it'll be elevated, so many of the pictures showed it at street level. It's actually higher by
Little bit
about
higher.
3 feet.
Correct.
did we, in between, what we're looking at to the left or to the west? There was gonna
Yes.
be
Yes,
a-
correct,
That's done, that's gone.
correct.
So there's nothing between this and Portillo's.
Correct.
Okay.
Outback.
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 Outback's in between there.
Yes.
Oh, Outback,
Okay,
which I've enjoyed very.
so this is a conceptual review, probably come back in November
As soon as we can.
for final site and landscaping review. Does that sound right?
Thank you. Looks great.
Thank you for having us.
Fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, listen to.
Okay. So going to 7C seems to be the more important than going to 7A and B at this point, right? Do you want to? It's all together. It is all together, but, okay. So this is the, with regard to the land use map amendment, official zoning map, but also the site landscaping and architectural plans for the Great Life, Greenfield, The Woods, proposed senior housing development at approximately 11940 West Edgerton Avenue, and the, what is it, the 12,000 block of West Fogle Avenue, submitted by Jessica Timmer, also Vrenka, and Greg Petrowski, doing business as Apple Hales Corners LLC. You want to start? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to do a brief overview, summary of the zoning and the requests, and then Mr. Morales will go into the design and do a presentation. Just to summarize, this is a proposed 192-unit senior housing complex. That's one building. And then there's a phased plan for an additional 8 townhouse units in the future to the north and 12 townhouse units in the future to the west. Altogether, this is approximately 14 acres of land, currently zoned R1 single family, and the comprehensive land use map identifies this land as single family use. Just to get your bearings straight, this is the extreme southwest corner of the city, where you have the village of Hales Corners to the immediate south. The municipal boundary is a little strange here. It cuts these properties here. It's about 200 feet north of Edgerton Avenue. So you do have the village of Hales Corners 200 feet north of Edgerton, and then the blue line is the municipal boundary for the city of Greenfield. The parcels we're talking about is this larger parcel here, owned by Mr. Petrowski, and then these 2 individual parcels, which are split by a right-of-way. Many years ago, the city had it laid out as a future road here going east-west, parallel with Holmes Avenue. For some reason, just this one little niche of right-of-way was actually carved out, splitting these properties. And then there is a request from that property owner, Mike Zock, owns both of those parcels split by the right-of-way. There is a request to vacate or discontinue that right-of-way as part of this development. As you may recall, we just went through a vacation with Holmes Avenue on along 76th Street. It's a lengthier approval process, state statutes. So that process will begin shortly with resolutions going before the Common Council. So the zoning as it's laid out today identifies this area in the light yellow as single family, and then this area to the east is zoned I institutional for the schools that are located. And then the comprehensive land, the proposal would be to rezone this to a planned unit development for mixed residential. And this would act as a buffer between the transition from I institutional heavy use, 116th is very busy, school times, to single family to the west. So the zoning request would act kind of as a buffer or transition from 2 different uses. And then the comprehensive land use map from 2008 identifies, again, this area as single family, which could act as a buffer with the request for a mixed residential comprehensive land use map amendment. Just a little spreadsheet here on how the zoning code for planned unit development, which again is the requested zoning district, the standards in the zoning code versus the proposal. For the most part, everything is being met. The gross density, the maximum is 20, and they're proposing 15 units. Again, the maximum for net density, which these are just the way numbers are played out in the zoning code. This is net versus gross. Net means the final land that's available once you factor in like landscaping requirements and such. So it's a little bit above that, but the gross density is met. Setbacks, for the most part, are beyond the requirements. There's one little corner where there's a 5-foot setback, and I'll let Mr. Morales identify where that is in the site plan. Minimum dwelling unit sizes, they are proposing a little bit smaller dwelling units than what the code asks for. 800 square feet for 1 bedroom versus 700 for the proposal. 1,000 square feet for 1 bedroom with a den versus the proposal, 100 square feet less than that. 2-bedroom dwelling units, they are exceeding the minimum dwelling unit size. Just summarize amenities that are being offered here. They will have staffing on site. We have concierge, chefs, housekeepers, maintenance, and then the shifts, and then also there will be a fitness center, hair salon, spa, theater room, chapel, library, and they will offer shuttle services. And all this will be highlighted in the floor plans that Mr. Morales will show before you. As far as parking goes, The proposal does exceed the required parking for total, and this is considering the 192-unit building plus the 12 plus the 8 future townhouses. They're proposing 240 parking spaces, of which 116 are underground, and the requirement is 224, so they're exceeding by 16 spaces. And now I will turn this over to Mr. Morales. Oh, yeah. Good catch.
Thank you again for having me. We're very proud here to present a project that we know has been a little bit of a talking point here for the community. One of the things that we were tasked with early on was to create a development in an area that had a lot of existing woodlands. We went through quite a very long process over a year ago, and recently also engaged the forester as well to continue to have that conversation. What you'll see here is an attempt to really kind of create a development that meets the densities and the feasibility that the developer is looking for, including addressing a lot of the sensitivities we've been hearing about along the way. Knowing that there's a way for us to do development in areas that are in buffer zones, or essentially areas that are adjacent to other communities, we take great pride in the projects that we design to make sure that we're always taking appropriate measures to try to address a lot of that buffering, which we'll kind of demonstrate here through the presentation. So I'll jump right in here. Some of the project goals, obviously, were to preserve the major woodland areas. As I mentioned, we've worked with the forester to do that. All of the major woodland areas here are actually being worked around, screening the building as much as we can with the natural landscaping, and also adding additional landscaping through the civil engineering aspect of what we're doing to increase some of that buffering. And also provide a very active, walkable, and safe interconnected community for the residents, as well as some of the areas, woodland areas that we're leaving alone, that could have some essentially interconnected trails that could serve as walking trails for the residents, for the neighboring communities. It will be an open site essentially for the neighboring residential to actually walk on and use the trail system, and we'll be enhancing those as best we can, as well as a potential educational component for the school nearby to be able to have areas within those nature areas to, again, have some educational components to it. All important things. We'll point out the picture here is actually from the roadway. The car you can barely see in the right corner is essentially where the drive access is going into the site. As you can see, that there's quite a bit of heavy greenery screening that area. The greenery in the distance is essentially the line, or just in front of the line that Christy pointed out, for is essentially where the boundary for the property line is. That's already 200 feet back in the distance. Our building footprint, which I'll walk through here shortly, is an additional 150 feet back at the closest point to where we're standing currently in this photo. So for a point of reference, the building first edge that you'll actually see in the layout is actually well over a football field away from the actual roadway where we're standing here in the image. Moving forward, some of the goals of what we're trying to do with the actual development itself is to create really an independent living facility for the residents, really kind of have a wellness aspect. That's why it's staffed, and there's great wellness opportunities, both from a programming perspective, as well as a opportunity for assisted essentially help from the staff that's there to kind of provide a great variety of wellness and physical activities, as well as the community aspect, maintaining that social atmosphere. And highly amenitized, this is a very high quality development that has a lot of great amenities for the residents. And the idea, as you'll see, is they'll be able to stay on site as much as they would like to have a full day and have access to all those activities without actually having to leave the site. So it's something that's important from the traffic perspective. There won't be a lot of traffic on and off this site. Just a little bit of a outlay of kind of the land you see here. We've labeled everything on the site plan. What you see in the white outline in the center is essentially the two sites that we're talking about. Windle Mill School is directly to the east of us, as well as the high school. You can see Edgerton Avenue is there as well as those other developments directly to the east, going all the way up to over to 108th Street. Zooming in, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the heights, what we're showing you here, and what we'll kind of walk you through. Our building, essentially, because of the grade changes, is essentially around 44 to 48 feet. You can see some of the buildings around us, and the structures are not that far off. At various level heights, we're actually able to actually get more density into the building and keep the building lower because of the shorter floor-to-floor heights in a residential environment. So you can see the middle school, the high school there, as well as kind of that post-acute medical, which is very similarly sized at 3 to 4 stories at about 48 feet at our highest point. Moving forward, I'll rotate your perspective here. South is to the left side of the page, or left side of the image, so north is to your right. Just to kind of talk about the different parcels. Parcel A, directly in the middle there, which is the majority of where the building is. The future parcels that Christy mentioned, some are in Parcel B and some are actually to the north or to the right of that existing water main easement. You'll see that we're not seeking approval for those pads. They're simply an area for where future development could happen that would be by others. You can see the existing woodland areas as they're here. They were mapped out with some partners that we have in the industry, as well as the forester. We made sure that we went through and identified a lot of that with the city to make sure that we're being very sensitive to it. And what that allows us to do is you take that and overlay this diagram, which shows you kind of the distance from all of the neighboring structures. You can see that 300-foot mark and 300 and 250-foot mark gets us pretty much close to the closest point on the site. I did mention from that roadway from Edgerton over to the first point on that site is well over a football field away from that roadway. So what does that leave us with when we talk about the woodland area and the distances from the structures? We're trying to capitalize on making sure that we can get everything far away, make sure it's screened, make sure we're doing as much as we can to provide as much layering and buffering to the neighboring properties as we come up with an ideal site location. And then we understand that, part of that is there's multiple steps to it. It's situating the building in a very intelligent way, making sure that there's plenty of tree cover around us, both existing as well as adding in new through landscaping. So when we talk about access, there's one access point off of Edgerton that gets you into the site. And then you'll see there's two connections to the two future parcels, one essentially to the west and one to the north. You'll see that dashed line on the right-hand side of the page that goes to Holmes Avenue. That's essentially emergency access only for emergency vehicles for the fire department. And we've already been in discussions with them, and we'll continue to have more discussions. There is no intent for that to be a public access point at any point. It will be coordinated with the fire department for what they would like to see. And you'll see we've done some things creatively with landscaping, which we've done in other municipalities, where we've created what looks like basically a double trail system. That's how the fire department can actually get onto the site safely. They essentially agree with that approach. We've actually done it at 84 South, and this allows the opportunity for emergency vehicles to get on without it having to look like there's a roadway all around this property, which nobody wants to look at, both from a resident perspective, and we also want to make sure that people aren't encouraged to try to use roadways they're not supposed to be using. So this is the site situated here. I mentioned, you see on the left-hand side of the page that blue area is essentially stormwater detention. Directly to the right of that is the first essentially leg of that building. That is what I was mentioning, a football field away from Edgerton Avenue. As you go onto the site, going from left to right, you go up to that drop-off area down at that main entrance. There's immediate visitor parking right there. And the idea here is really kind of create this front porch experience, which we'll show you kind of in the renderings. The building then goes to the east in two different legs. There is a back area that's limited. It's a smaller courtyard for outdoor activities. You'll see that in the renderings. You'll see how we're kind of addressing that. But even in this rendering, which a lot of the trees that are in here, we actually spent a long time actually trying to make sure that we're covering actually all of the existing trees that are in this area. So a lot of this is all there, plus the additional landscape we're providing. You see there's quite a bit of buffer from this building to the various directions. Even that closest resident that's to the top right corner of the development. So what do we mean when we talk about kind of enhancing some of those amenities for the community? So, along the stormwater pond there, as well as through some of the trails around the development, Greg is committed to kind of enhancing some of those trail systems to make sure it becomes a great community asset, and it's something that the community, surrounding community can use, as well as potentially create an educational component for the school system. Talking a little bit about canopy covers and the heights of things. You can see we've identified some of the tree canopy heights, both working with our industry partners as well as the city. You can see the canopies to the north side of the site or to the right side of the page. The canopies are well over 50 feet tall, 45 as low as 30 and 20 foot trees. Just from a perspective, up at the top there's a diagram running left to right on that page. As I mentioned, that first structure all the way to the south is well more than a football field away because it's across the road. There's essentially tree cover there. There'll be additional tree cover planted as part of the landscaping. You can see even at that line of sight, at the height of our building, it's set so far back that you would never actually see over the tree cover. It's something that we work with quite a bit. We do these studies quite often when we're building structures in neighboring communities where we know there's adjacencies that there's sensitivity to. As you can see, there's quite a bit of grade change too across the site. I'd like to play an animation very similar to the last presentation. This will give you a little bit of an idea as to how the building is situated, what the aesthetic is as you get closer to the building, and kind of some of the things we've done from various perspectives of trying to layer in and buffer and create opportunities. You'll see also the materials on the building. They're very natural colored materials, so they can start to blend into that tree environment. And they're, again, very natural warm tones as well. Distance back to the building. This is that private drive. This is now driving up to the front door. You can see along the right-hand side, very much a front porch experience for residents to come out, wait for their rides if they're going to get one, or have places to congregate out in front of the building. Move along here along the front of the building. There's some amenity spaces here. Again, the idea here is to make sure we're activating that ground floor. Make sure residents have a safe space, a great place to interact and have some social interaction there. This is the back side of the building where that outdoor kind of courtyard area is here. It's very limited, it's a very narrow space, but we want to make sure there was some great outdoor opportunities. And you can see to the right, there's a lot of buffering, a lot of tree cover that's actually going to shield this and kind of create a very safe, very pleasant environment to hang out on an afternoon. So as we go back to the presentation, I'll run through a few of those renderings that I mentioned, talk a little bit about the materials, kind of how we address some of these items. So this is that drop-off condition. There's enough room there for emergency vehicles to get underneath the cover. You can see the materials are very warm in nature. We're using a lot of wood materials or wood-look materials, a lot of high-quality materials. It's a low-maintenance building. And the materials are actually on the table here in front of us. There's some stone being used. There's some phenolic wood panels as well as some metal trim work. That kind of gives the depth to the building. It also, we're using some darker materials to make sure it blends in a little bit more into the landscape. Around this is that front porch condition I mentioned. There are balconies on the upper floors for some of the residents, and those are coupled again with some more greenscape elements that again get some more greenery up and near those doors for those residents. That front door area to the right-hand side is essentially some of those amenity spaces at that first level. Again, landscaping, lots of layering. You can see we're planting trees, a lot of lush landscaping, even in the front for that drop-off where that parking area is. Again, we're being very conscious of that and trying to layer a lot of that in. This is essentially where we were just looking at. So this is on the left-hand side is essentially still the front of the building. There's some social spaces out there with, again, layered landscaping at that front parking area. This is the back side of the building. You see there's a small outdoor area here for congregation of the residents. What you see directly in the center of that shot at the building is essentially story and a half height space. That's essentially the cafe or dining area for the residents. So they've got indoor access. Those are some garage doors we can open up. They're going to get great environments again for those warmer months when we actually get to enjoy it here in Wisconsin. It'll be a great opportunity to get outside and actually have your meals right outside the cafe. This is looking from the other side where we were just looking at. The left-hand side, you can see we're going to have operable partitions there. Make sure that the seating is very kind of inviting and warm. And there's a lot of natural materials here. It'll give really residents a variety of options here to enjoy the space and enjoy their environment where they're going to be living. That concludes the presentation. If you'd like, I can bring around the materials. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
I like how you did the virtual reality with the animation, kind of walking through this. Obviously, with the neighborhood, a lot of the residents aren't thrilled with the concept of this coming into the neighborhood. Yeah, it's on. The question I have for you is, have you put together some of the views from the
Can you hear it now? Just to be clear, can you hear it
Really, the question is, has he
now?
put together views from the neighbors' perspectives, looking at your place? So these are fantastic. I'm very familiar with, I grew up in this area. I understand, we used to play back here. So I'm very familiar with the topography but probably more interesting from a neighbor's perspective, if I'm looking in from their backyard or from the street, what is their view gonna be? Because they know what it looks like today. I think it's gonna be really well protected. I think this is a good concept and will fit in there nicely. I think it's getting them at ease with the concept of what you're doing, because you guys do a great job by helping them understand what is this gonna be the impact on them tomorrow.
Sure. So we actually went out and took a variety of photos from all the different areas, and quite frankly, you just can't see the building from those different access
I
points.
agree with you. I just,
Sorry, we went
they
over
need-
to, for example, and took some pictures there, and we saw where the markers are that lead you into, there's a kind of a little path. You actually can't see far back enough. We actually did a few exercises trying to superimpose it, and they're just not visible. And that's why a very important piece of the presentation is we wanted to show you that view from the roadway as it currently exists. And those are some of the major brushes that would be staying as part of the development. You actually can't see past it. So putting you at that roadway looking back, you can't see much, and that's why we didn't include that in the presentation.
have you done, and this is probably a rhetorical question, because I think you probably have done it, using drones to get a different perspective from around it? I've seen that with other folks doing that type of concept. That way gives you, I'll call it the bird's eye view of it.
Sure.
Even though it's not from their backyard, but it helps them understand the viewpoint. Because I think it's going to be extremely protected, the way you have it designed. But they live there, I don't.
Right. So the drone perspective, so we looked at it, we started with the aerial and the animation on purpose, so everybody could understand where it's situated on the site. What we wanted to be careful of too, though, is that every time we go up in the air and do that, it's not a very realistic perspective. Even at a second floor window from a residence, you'd never get up past that tree canopy unless you were in a 5-story house, for example. The thing is, you will just never see past those canopies because most first floor residential is usually up 12 feet. And in the height of a person, you're at 18. Those trees are a minimum of 25 to 30 feet surrounding the building. So you just never see through it. So what we didn't want to do is create a false presentation of where that building was situated and what you could see. And getting up above those trees, it's just not a realistic vantage point for the neighboring structures.
I agree with you, but it's getting the neighborhoods convinced of that concept.
They're not gonna get anything better.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Concern?
Done a great job. I think that fits, and I think it's separated enough from the neighbors.
You gotta talk louder, the
Speak into this
microphone's not
mic.
picking up either.
You have to, I would just remind everybody that they need to pull the microphones in and make sure the green light's on, because otherwise.
System.
And I love the way it looks. I'm wondering, that might just be the perfect answer for Cindy and I in a few years. So,
Thank you.
except for we want to do that a little bit further south, but if we had to stay here, this might be the answer.
Any other questions I can answer?
I did get a couple correspondence from the neighboring residents, and one of the main concerns was the potential of traffic into homes, parking on homes, the through traffic on that double lane, whatever.
Sure.
There's things that can be done to make it, almost impossible. Potentially a pole with a lock on it that the fire department can get through.
Absolutely. So we would work directly with the fire department to ensure that whatever we put in place there, they're 100% on board with and feel that it's not going to be a deterrent from them to be able to do what they do best in protecting your city. So different things have been proposed. There are essentially gates that lift up when they hear a siren coming by. There are various different things you can do there. What we would want to not do is propose something and let the fire department have to deal with it. We'd rather work with them directly to make sure. So as far as the double lane and keeping that as a limited, so it doesn't look like a roadway, we've actually worked with your fire department previously on other development, and we've been able to get that approved too. So a combination of those things will be discussed with them to make sure that whatever's provided here limits that access, because we're also discouraging that. We don't want traffic going onto homes, but ultimately we want to make sure we're not getting in the way of the fire department doing their job.
Realistically, the fire department would probably almost never, 90% of the time, never need that access point, but it's available for them when they do.
Exactly, because we want to make sure that they can get to the back of that building should there
Right.
be any sort of emergency or fire that they need to battle, so that they don't have to get around the building from the front side.
That access point would still be available for the neighbors to traverse through, and the neighbors' dogs, and potentially children getting to the middle school and back from that neighborhood?
Pedestrian and bicycle traffic it'd be a little harder with a bicycle, but you could get through. You just have to go around it, essentially. Pedestrians could very easily get through. The idea here is to limit vehicle traffic, except for the emergency vehicles.
But more than likely you'll allow, or the developer will allow the residents of the neighboring communities on the property and allow and create access points to the middle school.
Yes, that is.
Kids in the background, so.
Yes, that's currently what the plan is. We'll work with the school to make sure that they're best situated in the spots that make sense for them, should they want to use those.
Just to be clear too, that access road isn't for ambulances. It's for if, in the event that the place ever starts on fire, that a fire truck can get to the rear of the building.
Correct.
So I guess I'm the mayor and all the neighbors are here. There's two developments that are kind of contemplated on this side. This one, I think, blended in. It did some things that were important. The folks that live on Holmes and Carpenter. The folks that live on that street never wanted those roads to extend and to hook up with Edgerton, which was part of the city's master plan, right? You would not want folks, that's where the roads are supposed to go, and nobody wants those roads to go through. So I just want to be, no, we're not, well, no, we're not having a conversation. There will be a public hearing, sir. So this isn't a public hearing. There will be a public hearing where everyone, I will just say that over the course of time, and I guess I've been doing this for 14 years, the folks that I have talked to, generally speaking, it may not be the folks that are in this room this evening, have not wanted to see Carpenter and Holmes expanded eastward because there was a concern, just like there is on Barnard and some of those interior streets, that the neighborhood would be used as a cut-through. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to create controversy or enhance people's adrenaline at this meeting. Generally speaking, everywhere throughout the city, where there's one quarter section road and there's another quarter section road, people don't like them cutting through because they typically do that. I can just say that generally speaking. Whether you agree with that, you don't have to, okay? Sorry, okay? So one of the things that we were trying to do from our perspective was to prevent that cut through, okay? That was one of the things that was a big concern to some within the neighborhood. Others maybe not. It depends on whether you're on the street that has the cut through or not, right? That's what it depends on. The other thing that we were trying to do is we were trying to come across with a way that we would not be disruptive to the wooded area that's in there and the wetlands that are in there. That's the other thing that was of primary consideration. In order to do that, you tend to have to focus or concentrate the development sort of in a center, as opposed to cutting through roads and sewers and water lines and utilities and creating a grading plan and creating stormwater detention now that you have to serve the entire area because there's a significant water issue over there. We agree that there's a water issue. That was the point of this kind of clustering development and sort of my support internally. The original plan that came through looked like another plan where it was just kind of cookie cutter and throwing up buildings, and that did not make sense to me, and I wouldn't support that. The other thing is that it needed to be architecturally significant. It needed to be worth value, which I think this project does. The other thing that was important to me is with regard to traffic and Edgerton and the relationship with Hales Corners. There are potentially 216 units here, probably closer to 180. I don't know whether or not those townhouses to the west will ever be built, and I don't know whether the townhouses to the north will ever be built. But generally speaking, having a lot of experience with the quotes, as I become 56 this year, I guess I'm eligible to go there. Folks my age that are living in these places or older, whether it's at Layton Terrace, or whether it's at Lexington, or whether it's at Clement Manor, or whether it's in Tuckaway, which has got probably the highest density of multifamily or condominium, this kind of stuff around, you never see any traffic for the most part. So when you think about neighborhoods and you think about school buses and you think about all this other kind of traffic that's going on, this is truly not as intrusive from a traffic standpoint as some of those other things. Truthfully. And I have sat outside of Tuckaway, and I have sat outside of all of these places and watched it over the course of time. You may not disagree with that. I encourage you to do that. The biggest concern to me was sort of creating the buffer. There is another development to the west that I have of all of the things that are being done with this project, clustering, keeping green space, kind of respecting to the extent, understanding that it's being redeveloped, that's kind of not the same situation with the development to the west. That development is actually surrounded on 3 sides by single-family homes. It is. And from my perspective, and I understand the developer is here, 3 sides, right? We agree. We agree. Yeah, but to the east of this development is also significant institutional stuff. To the east of this development is also schools, with a forestry area that we assisted the Whitnall School District in creating, that this connects to and allows the folks that live in this neighborhood now who walk through there, I think, to actually walk through there on a path in some of the area. So I understand that I don't want to get involved with that other development at this point. When it comes to this development, I'm supportive of it because it does everything that we would want it to do. There are folks that say, well, it's zoned single family, you should just put single family in. In this area, if you were to do that, most of your trees would disappear. Most of your woods would disappear. And if you're cool with that, that's fine. Most of the people that I've talked to that live in that neighborhood are very concerned about the deer and the fox, and they don't like coyotes, but that's the kind of stuff that they're interested in. And creating that natural buffer, or enhancing or preserving as much as you possibly can with all the commotion that's kind of happening with the schools and stuff. That's where this project comes from. I don't vote for these things. I give it to the Common Council. This body is a recommending body. It goes before the Common Council. All I try to do is have folks provide things to our Common Council that have been thought about at great length, understanding that there are polar opposite opinions, even as I look into this crowd right now, with regard to this and what it does for them. The only person that I can think of, and the site plan is, can't remember which one the south one is, at Holmes? Holmes is the second? Yeah. Is the southeast corner of Holmes at the end of the street. That is the only house that is even remotely close and it would have impact, generally speaking. That's truthfully, I mean, the other homes, the worst homes probably would be the 6 townhouses or 3 townhouses to the west that would be put in. That's what I see with regard to this development. For the most part, I think it's really good. Others may not agree. And it's not a public hearing, but I'll give some flexibility. So you need to understand that this isn't a public hearing, okay? This isn't the kind of place, if you have a few opinions, why? Because, huh?
When do you hear from us? You're voting and you're not hearing.
So these guys aren't what they do is they look at the stuff that's being prepared, right? These folks have been, most of these guys have been on here for a very long time, know a lot about this city. He does. He lives pretty close. I think you went to Whitnall High School. Your kids did. I have tromped around when there have been water issues on homes in Carpenter and people's backyards, when the guy built the flag lot, and I'm pretty familiar with this stuff. Alderperson Castor's been around. I saw 1997 on something I was looking at previously on the Planning Commission. He understands what's going on. We have kind of an idea what's happening, despite what you all may think. With regard to that, this is a planning commission. These folks spend a lot of money to apply to the city to present an idea to citizens who get paid $6 a month, $5 a month, excuse me, to give their input on whether or not this makes the city a better, a worse place. That's what they do. Huh? So when it comes to the public hearing, there are notice requirements by state statutes. That's December 17th. Okay? December 17th is when the notice would be. Okay? It has to be published. I would put a caveat on that. The Greenfield Now or the West Dallas Greenfield Now or however those nows are split up, they've been missing publication dates. So we pay them to publish notices that we're required to do under the law. And if they miss it, they don't publish it, then we have to delay it as a matter of law. It's got nothing to do with us, and it's usually not a pleasant thing when those emails or phone calls are happening. Okay? With regard to this, what do you want to say? If you come up to the microphone and tell me what you want to say, give me a couple minutes, right? You got a couple minutes, right? This isn't to give you. I would love to hear from you. No, I would love to hear from you. But if you can wait until December 17th, that would be great. You can go to the microphone and ask me a question. Please let me know what your name is and kind of give me an idea where you live. Go to the microphone. You're on TV. We're being broadcast to 8 billion people that choose to watch it.
They have to choose.
Not that you should be nervous about that, okay? Don't be nervous. Many of them can't understand you. So.
I don't understand the whole process, so I'm sorry for my ignorance.
That's okay.
The question is, and I talked to Alderman.
Could you, is the mic?
Name?
Just your name, just your name.
My name is Paul Strassi. I live in Holmes Avenue.
Okay, all right.
I live about 5 blocks from the end, or 5 houses from the end of the road.
Okay.
At this public hearing, will there be representatives of the developer to answer questions?
Yes.
Because based on this today, okay, we talked about parking being great, but you're ignoring a quarter of the units. Okay, you're saying those require no parking.
Okay, so.
I mean, those are the type of things I want to have
So what?
a conversation with. And that's what's, to me, is missing the process.
And sure, sorry about that.
And I've seen it happen, is these guys have been putting a lot of effort in and a lot of money in to put this presentation together. And I think that just builds up a snowball that means it's just going, okay? And we don't get input onto it until the snowball is the size of a house,
Right.
okay? And we can't stop it, okay? And I'm just frustrated with the fact that we are, I don't want to say ignored, but it's darn close to that, up until the point that, we're almost ready to go. All we need to do is give a thumbs up when we run away. So I know I exceeded my 2 minutes, so.
No, you can so just let me answer that. So I was born and raised here, and my dad always said you can't fight City Hall, and I kind of thought that you shouldn't have to, right? So we do things under the law. If I wanted to, I could say there will be no comment. I'm going to escort you out. Please be quiet. They've spent a lot of money. They have the right to present their. That's not how any of us sort of operate. What we prefer is that there is communication. We encourage like neighborhood meetings. We want them to meet with you. We want them to answer your questions ahead of time. I can assure you that it's of no pleasure to me to be sitting here as mayor. You know, I don't know if I'm the chair of this commission, but I'm also the Common Council chair, right? So I'm the one that does the public hearings. I can assure you that it's not pleasurable for me to have an entire room full of people angry and throwing and cussing and going, you know, and then to watch neighbor fight neighbor because, you know, they sold something to this guy, or, well, it's not really impacting them. I've seen all of that stuff, and I think most of us have. What I would like you to do, and what I would encourage you to do, Mr. Morales is a pretty decent guy. I've known him, I don't know, 3 years now, 4 years, something like that. Rinka Chong, which is now called Rinka, is one of the premier architecture firms in Milwaukee, right? It's not cheap what this developer is doing in any way, shape, or form, trying to fill in all of the things, you know, this is a laundry list of things that we need to accomplish, right? Rinka does probably better at that than anyone that I've seen. I would encourage you to talk to him. I would encourage you and everyone that's sitting next to you to talk to Mr., I want to say Piotrowski. I would encourage you to do that. Because they're trying, based on all of the stuff that we have said, these are going to be problems for you. Right? We don't just do this like willy-nilly, oh, come on in, and the steam, that we try not to do that. It doesn't do me any good to do that. It's, at the end of the day, what's ever there is going to be reflective on me. And it may be, well, all that damn mayor let him put that in there, and he was supportive, and he should never have done that, and I hate him. Right? I mean, that could happen. Maybe it already is. I don't know. But I would encourage you to talk to them. Under the law, it's like you have so many weeks that it's got to have 2-part notice. There's a public hearing. Under our rules, you're limited to 3 minutes, right? I've never cut anybody off at 3 minutes. And my staff gets really pissed at me because sometimes it gets really long. But I'd rather talk, just like now, I'd rather talk it out. Everyone doesn't always get what they want, but by the same token, we often get a lot of what we want if we talk through it. Because, believe it or not, despite what you see on TV, most people agree on stuff. They do. Generally.
And if you look at Greenfield, I mean, to me, this fits a need. Our population's getting older. We need more facilities like this of higher quality. You may not want it in this spot. Do we need more? Yes, we do. None of us are getting any younger. That's the reality of it. Going to need institutions like this or developments like this to accommodate to it. Why not have it in our community? These people live here their lives. Why not? They want to stay in the community.
And just so you know, like at 84 South, which, you know, those apartments that are at 92nd and Layton, do you know those things are 95% full? That they were full almost as soon as they were built? This isn't that. This is different. But the folks that live around here want to stay around here. I'm just saying. So what I encourage you to do, Mr. Piotrowski's got the glasses on right there. Don't leave after the meeting. Stick around and talk to him. Just say, we would like to have another meeting. We can talk too. I love having conversations. Right. Okay. Am I lecturing? Am I lecturing? I have had a lot of coffee today. I've been up since, I mean, everybody's probably been up since 5:32, but I have a lot of coffee flowing through me right now. And I have a daughter that has homework when I have to get home. So if I'm impatient or it sounds like I'm lecturing, it's kind of my nature. You can ask everybody here I talk too much. And at the end of the day, my voice tends to disappear.
A good conversation, so.
And that's coming from a pastor right there. So I typically go to Starbucks 2 or 3 times a week now. On 76th and Layton, I have office hours there. I run into a lot of people. I try to talk to people as much as I possibly can. It does me more good being there than it does sitting in my office, having everybody try to make it look like they're busy because I'm there, right? We have good staff. I don't have to do that. So, I would give you my phone number, but it really is on YouTube, and there are 8 billion people that has a potential to watch this, but I think we have 17 subscribers, so I'm probably safe. Okay? I'll give you my card. I'll sit down with all of you. And I'm obnoxious sometimes. You can just say, "Shut up, Mike," because I talk too much.
Does that
You
work?
it does when you do it. So, so with that being said, is that fair? That would be wonderful. I would love to have a conversation with you. I'll block off 2 or 3 hours if you want.
I spoke to him the other day for probably a half hour, and it was very pleasant, yes.
Okay, I'll do that. Just call. I'll give you my card. I got it. Okay? Does anybody else want to say anything about this development? I mean, just in a couple minutes, just a couple minutes, if you want to come up, just give me you have to come up. You have to come up. You have to go to the microphone. Otherwise, nobody can hear it. And
Okay, can you hear me, everybody?
yeah.
Big mouth, everybody can hear me.
Okay.
Okay, I think everybody is concerned about the development. Everybody's old-fashioned. We get a lot of traffic on Edgerton, and I'm gonna live directly right across the street from it. And my concern is the children walking to school. Right now, we have speeders, we have lots of traffic. We're getting lots more traffic because they went and made Highway 100 bigger now. So everybody uses Edgerton for a little shortcut to get to other expressway. And my concern is, I know you're gonna have holding ponds, 2 of them, right? One on each side? Correct. Okay. Well, I look at Weimer's down the street, and where I live, I see the land in an angle. And just from that water, or the weather that we had with all that water, my sump pump was kicking in every 30 seconds. And what my concern is, I look at Weimer's down the street, and they have this giant-sized culvert. And I see all the apartments down there, and they have holding ponds on both sides too. Well, at one time, I thought they had to move one of the houses right where that culvert is because it was getting all flooded. I just want to make sure that's not going to be me. Living across the street, my sump pump's kicking in every 30 seconds. What am I supposed to do with all this water?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So and I would again encourage you to talk to them. So just the pretty pictures, whether you think they're pretty or, I think they're nice pictures. When it comes to water, stormwater, there are rules by MMSD, the DNR, with regard to 2 things. They're there for quality of the water, they talk about suspended solids, and they talk about quantity of water. The stormwater rules are pretty intense. I would strongly recommend that you talk to them with regard to the direction of water, how much water is coming off, how much water is staying to filter it for quality, how much is moving along. The area to the east of this, at the end of Holmes and Carpenter, and up by Simon's thing that was along the freeway, there's a lot of water there. And
It angles.
it sure does. And it's historically been an area that's required attention and required culverts and required all sorts of things. It's probably why there's a forest by Whitnall High School because of the water. But I would strongly suggest that you talk to them about that. I'm not an expert on any of that.
The problem we have now is all the water comes towards us, and then it goes all the way down.
So what they have to do when they put these developments in as a general, and I say as a general rule, the water that's on their property has to stay on their property and they have to take care of it. They can't dump the water from their development onto your property. They have to kind of control it for quality, so suspended solids, and they have to control it with regard to quantity flowing off. So the engineers can address that. They have to review all that stuff. So the plans, let's talk about the plans for this. These get sent to MMSD. These get sent to all sorts of folks that are looking at this stuff. And they don't go, maybe it will. They don't do it that way. And you can be sure by the sheer amount of money that you have to spend for engineering that it's okay. But talk to them. They can explain that to you, and I would think that generally, from what I've heard with regard to this development, the management of stormwater in that area will be better than it is now.
So are
And I think they can explain that to you.
So are you going to be working with Hales Corners too, since a lot of the water's going to be coming into Hales Corners and then,
I don't know where the water is going. Most of the water flows northeast. It doesn't flow south. So most of the water comes from the south and flows, if I,
It looks like he's shaking his head over there.
Please do.
you have to do it at the mic, though. You have to do it at the mic. Otherwise, people can't hear you. I'm sorry.
So, just to be clear, the property that's proposed here for the development, all water by code must stay on that property. We are using a very well-known civil engineer here who is very closely tied to the state to make sure that that is happening. We are not allowed by code to let the water leave the site. It's the reason why the stormwater pond is where it is, and it's the reason why we added a second one to make sure that there was plenty capture there. Everything is essentially being captured and routed to those ponds, and those ponds, when they're being engineered and reviewed both by the state and the city, have to account for higher events where there may be more water in the area. So all of that is accommodated. We are not allowed to move forward with permitting the building at all unless the state and all the agencies that are reviewing that are allowing for that. But by code, no water can leave our site. It all has to be collected and dealt with on site. So no water will be leaving, going into the neighboring municipality.
Okay. Are there any other things that, again, I would encourage you, they're here, to talk to them after this meeting, or at least maybe set up something. If anyone wants to sit with me and talk to me, or the alder person, your alder person, I mean, more than willing to do that. I'm always willing to do that. Okay? Anything else? Any other comments on this development? Did you have to come up and go to the microphone? You have to kind of give me your name too and sort of where you're from. Generally.
Hi, I'm Barry McLaughlin. I live on the 122nd block of homes. You mentioned a couple of times the law for the process of getting the necessary approvals. You just mentioned MMSD. Is that process documented anywhere?
Everywhere.
Where, that's what because.
So what do you mean? So when it goes to MMSD to look at?
Not that specifically, but just what are the approval, here where you're presenting your recommendation from a planning commission. Then what's the next step? It goes to common, so, I don't need you to go through the whole thing, but what are those processes and what are the dates when those things happen? Who are the people involved with those? And that's the information that I would like to get, so I can follow the process and I can send emails, I can communicate, I can call, and those are the things that I would like to know.
Yeah, just before she begins. So when we get these things at this level, we get what you see there, right? And there, those staff reports, you saw that she went through. You can go online. You can look at that under the staff stuff, right? You won't see the engineered drawings or the as-built for the building or the state approved construction plans. You won't see the reports from MMSD and the stuff going back and forth between engineers to deal with this stuff. That stuff's not readily available online. Just to be clear about that. Because that's kind of like construction stuff. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to conceptually, does this building make sense? Looking like this, trying to be as specific as we possibly can with regard to what it's going to look like, right? Once this happens, if this happens, then it kind of goes through those processes. I don't know what this little video cost. I'm guessing 30 or 40 grand. I don't know what all the visits by the architects and his staff to the site to do surveying and to do all that stuff and to do all the background. There's probably $150,000 into this already, I'm guessing, or more. And they don't even know if it's going to work, right? they're not going to spend the thousands of dollars on construction plans and going through hiring civil engineers to go through MMSD and all that stuff until they're kind of certain that it's going to work. And it's a huge sort of risk for them to do this, right? So you're not going to see, what did MMSD say, right? By the same token, you can talk to people in our engineering group, and Christy, go ahead, Christy, sorry.
To answer your question, the next step, and there is only one more step for the approval process. The request is to rezone the land and to amend the comprehensive land use plan and the site landscaping architectural design. That process, the state statutes determine the
Maybe not so.
determine the process with a comprehensive land use map amendment. There is a 30-day public comment period that's required. Hence, the next date, the next meeting is December 17th. And that is when the Common Council could vote that evening on the rezone, comprehensive land use map amendments, and the site landscaping plans. And after
I don't know why it's
awful.
You have a speaker above your head which screws it up too.
Is that it? Okay. If the Common Council were to approve the project that evening, the developer at that point simply could move forward with submitting plans to the state and submitting plans to the city for permitting. It's a lengthy process. Also, one thing I did want to mention is the developer is requesting a 2-year approval. There is a project potential in McGuanago. He's not quite sure which one would take place first. Not interested in doing both at the same time. Hence the request for a 2-year approval, which would mean that he would have, if the Common Council were to approve it in December, would have 2 years.
Does that make sense? Okay. The other final thing I just want to say is our ordinance says people that are located within 400 feet of this get notified, and that's in Greenfield, the Greenfield residents. On the Hales Corners side, we send the notices to their village clerk, and sometimes the developers will also get the mailing lists of people that are on that side. Then you say, why is it only 400 feet? We've looked at this 100 times. Some communities it's 100 feet, some it's 200 feet, some it's 300 feet, some it's 400 feet. That's just how it is. And there's always someone at the public hearing that lives 410 feet away. It's like, why didn't you tell me, right? That's supposed to be the reasonable amount of distance between some activity and your property.
We still publish it in the paper. And
We still publish in the paper, we do all that stuff too. If the paper remembers to publish it and doesn't, so. Okay. Anybody else? Honest to God, this is the last one. If you gotta come up. So I strongly encourage you to meet with the architects, meet with the owner. They'll go through all of the detailed questions for you.
Nicole Tomczyk off of Edgerton.
Okay.
I just had a question. Is the December 17th an open
Yes,
public meeting?
it's a public hearing.
And then we get notice, residents 400 feet.
Within 400 feet, if you live in Greenfield, if you live in Hales Corners, your clerk gets that notice. And I'm not sure if the developer, I think he's tried to reach out to the folks that are along there. So if you live 405 feet away, right, it's done by GIS, right? We try to be, yes.
it'll be on our website too.
It'll be on our website. So the way the public hearing works is you formally sign into the public hearing. We open a public hearing. You're given an opportunity to speak for, against, or for informational purpose. You have questions, those kinds of things. You know, we staff, us, the developer, the architect, try to answer those questions to the extent we can. And it's kind of an evidentiary thing, right? So everything you say, it's your name, your address, all that stuff. These are my concerns. When it's all over.
That meeting covers the rezoning, the plan concept, and that portion of.
So with everything, there's two things that control the use of property in a city or a village. There's the zoning, you know, is it residential, is it industrial, is it multifamily, whatever it is, right, commercial. Then there's something called the comprehensive land use plan. And that's the city's plan of, well, what do we think things should be, right? oftentimes what happens is the two are in conflict with each other because zoning has been in place essentially forever on a property, and the comprehensive land use plan is only about 10 or 15 years old, right? The state of Wisconsin requires that we all have a comprehensive land use plan. In this case, in order to do this, you have to change the zoning and you have to change the comprehensive land use plan. And you have to get approved for the PUD, which is the new zoning, which gives us tighter control as opposed to if it was just multifamily or something, right? With a PUD, you're actually defining what it is and how it is. So it's much more restrictive. Is that fair, generally? Everything the whole package that way. Yep. So it's everything, right? And you try to do that together. Okay? Anything else? You good? You good? Any other questions?
None here?
Sure.
Nope.
Plenty of time. Right? Okay. Anything from you? Developer, you're here? You're willing to meet? Okay. I'd ask if you guys could hang out in case they want to meet with you. That would be awesome. I think that's it.
Do we have to take action on any of those things? Also,
Um,
A, B, and C?
Well, I mean, recommend approval and authorize this public hearing to begin, right? Scheduled to begin, which would make it December 17th, assuming the newspaper publishes it properly.
What he just said.
They have to apply.
I'll second.
They have to, yes, they do. Motion by Commissioner Rogers, second by Commissioner Collins. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Who? What? No? Okay, Community Development Manager report.
We do have some big projects coming up in the next month. I don't know if, I don't think I can say names yet. The applications haven't formally been submitted, but just to give you a heads up, November and December will be busy months. Big projects.
That's good.
Not by your house, other than this, just so you know. All right, entertain a motion to. Is
I'll
there
make a
anything else?
motion to adjourn.
Motion by formal Commissioner Carlson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Weiss. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Are we turning it off?